Hello, welcome back to the RC Pilot's Log. Let's get on with building this DC-3. In the last episode you saw I started half of the fuselage and had formed one half of all the ribs and on the rudder. I've now completed the second half of the fuselage. The ribs are all on, so the profile's really nice, and I've reinforced it with some balsa down the centre section, and the rudder is all nicely hinged and reinforced. This is looking really good. I'm really pleased. So I'm going to move on now to the wings and start with the wing centre box. So the wings on the DC-3 have a nice centre section that is flat, and then a dihedral up towards the outside edge of the wing, which lends itself nicely to making the wing in two parts. A centre section that is obviously flat with no dihedral, and then the outer parts of each wing up towards the tips and the ailerons with dihedral. So I'm going to start today working on the centre part of the wing, and it's all nice round numbers from this plan down at 50%, so each half of the centre section of the wing is 15 centimetres wide and 19 centimetres deep. So I've mapped that out onto this piece of paper, and then planned out where I'm going to put each of the ribs. I've again halved the number of ribs, and I've put 5 on each side, left a 3mm gap on the centre where the two halves join, so the fuselage, which is 6mm, can fit down in between them and glue in, and the outer rib which will make flush to the rest of the wing as that goes up and out, and I can use some carbon fibre tubes that I have as spars to join that, and I'll make these permanently joined. I don't see any point in having them detachable. It's going to be about a 1.4 metre wingspan, which is the same as a lot of my other planes, and that's perfect in the back of my car. So for the whole wing I'm going to be using some balsa profiles that I've had from another project. This is the leading edge profile. This is just a nice offcut that will do the half of the front wing box. So that will go all the way to the leading edge across there. I also have some trailing edge profile, again, which I will trim and use to suit for the entire wing. So that will go on the trailing edge, and I've got some 3/8 balsa sheet which I will cut the ribs with, and then I've cut some strips of 1/4 inch square balsa which I will use as a spar all the way across, and I also need to use a similar method for the motor mount spar, which will come out just across the 4th rib here, in line with the 4th rib. And that all lines up nicely with the plans, same dimensions, so it should fit perfectly well. So I'm going to get on cutting those bits and see how we get on. So this is all looking quite good. I've left the bottom spar overlapping towards the outside so that I can slot in the first rib of the rest of the wing, and I'm going to make the motor mount boom out of this piece of 1/4 by 1/2 that I've cut down to size. I will notch it to sit over this the bottom spar, and it will run all the way back to the trailing edge and give a nice firm mounting, and I'll have to obviously reinforce it a bit more as well, so possibly cut 2 of these and mount them in an L shape to give some strength. So I'll give that a go now. So I'm going to use this Gorilla D3 wood glue, water resistant wood glue, to start assembling the inner wing. I'm just going to take it 1 rib at a time, make sure they're square vertically and in line with the plans and square with all other parts. I will do all of the ribs, the engine support and the top rib, top and bottom spars before gluing on the trailing edge and leading edge, because they're not flat with the table. The ribs curve up front and rear to form the airfoil. So I'm going to do all the bits that are flat and square first, and then do the trailing and leading edge. So that'll take about 20 to 30 minutes to grab, and then a full 24 hours to cure, but generally I've found that within an hour it's strong enough to be moved, and I'll come back in an hour and start on the opposite side and get all of the ribs together, and I can add the top spar in. So there's a few bits I'm going to work on in between. I'm going to have a think about mounting the landing gear. They will mount under this pods, but they're going to be fixed. I'm not going to have retracts on this. I want to keep it simple and light, so I'll have a look at how I'm going to do that. So this is what I've come up with for the landing gear. It's 2 pieces of 8mm carbon tube with 2mm hole drilled through, and a 2mm carbon rod axle, and I can simply glue the axle through these 2 rods through the tubes, and then the tubes will go into blocks in the wing, and it will straddle the motor mount support like this, and that should provide plenty of strength, and it's very, very light. Foam wheels and carbon fibre tubes. So I'm going to go ahead and make 2 of those, and make a couple of blocks to mount the tubes into the struts. So should be good. This is a really dense bit of balsa, so I'm going to use it as a couple of mounting blocks for the carbon tube landing gear supports. I'll cut a suitable size blocks and drill the 10mm hole, and glue the carbon strut into that. So I'll need probably two blocks per strut, so 4 struts with 4 blocks with the hole down the middle. So while the glue's been drying on the ribs and spars, I came up with a solution for the landing gear. Again, these will be fixed landing gear. It's two 10mm carbon tubes and a 4mm carbon rod as the axle, and I simply drilled a 2mm hole through the carbon, pushed the rod through, and glued it in place. There are these balsa blocks for the tubes to go in, and they slot in between the ribs over the top of the engine stay as per the full size. They won't retract, they're just going to be fixed for simplicity and for weight saving. Need a little bit of tweaking, possibly some adjustment, and a lot of epoxy. At the moment it's kind of drying with some Gorilla Glue, but it's not really going to do the job properly, so I'll get some new epoxy and epoxy that in place. But the wing frame is dry now, so I can slide it over and move on to the next side. And this, of course, the gear will actually go on the underside. This is mocked up on the top, but the spacing's identical, and it will be underneath and slightly more central on the wing, but still on the front half of the wing. I've added an extra spar for the engine, for the motor mounts, and I'm actually going to put some thin plier plate on the top of those as well, and they should be plenty strong enough now. Cut this down to size and glue a piece on the top of each of those, possibly one on the bottom just to box it in, but I think one on the top should be enough. I'm going to cut those and glue them on. So here's the completed built up centre of the wing. It should be nice and strong, got the leading edge and a trailing edge, some nice strong motor mount booms, and it's currently just drying. I'm using out of CA and epoxy, so I'm using the Gorilla wood glue where the joints are nice and tight, and some of the Gorilla expanding glue where there's a little bit of a gap to fill. And both of those should form a really nice strong joint, and once that's done I can sand it smooth just around some of the joins and profile changes, and then mount it into the fuselage. I have left this 6mm slot in the centre for the fuselage to the 6mm of the Depron foam to drop into, and I can mount that in there quite nicely once it's all dried and sanded smooth. There we are, all glued and sanded. Got a really nice airfoil shape to it, slightly different shape than the plans, simply because I've sanded it a bit to get the trailing edge to match in, to blend in, and the same slightly on the lower leading edge, but I think that's very suitable. Really nice, solid, strong construction there. Very pleased with it. Very, very light. In fact, I'll get the scales and I'll weigh it. But it's time to get it mounted on the fuselage, or at least test fit it on the fuselage. Okay, so I have cut out and relieved the fuselage to fit around the wing, and it lines up nicely with the profiles. You can just about make out on camera there the curve airfoil in the profiles, and watch this. I mean, I could not be more pleased with that. The fit is perfect, and I'm really pleased. My patience has paid off. It was quite a tricky job building that wings centre section, quite fiddly, bit of trial and error, lots of glue. It weighs, the wing section weighs 59 grams, which I think is really, really good. It's got heavy duty motor mounts on it. They're very, very strong, and they're tied into all the way through to the trailing edge of the wing, and I think that is going to work beautifully. So yeah, it's starting to take some shape. I need to start thinking about the rest of the wings, the dihedral, which I'm planning to add 5 degrees dihedral on. The plans use a doubler at the front and the rear of the wing to set the dihedral. I'm actually going to use a carbon spar, carbon tubing, set at the right angle, and that will go all the way up to the tip of the wing. So that's great. I am super pleased with that. I think it's brilliant, and the fact that, you know, it just so nicely slides in and holds in place. You know, that's the perfect fit for gluing something in. But that's it for this episode, but I'm really pleased with the progress so far. It's a little bit slow, but I'm not in a rush and I've got plenty of time. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time where I'm going to work on the rest of the wings.